What does the film tell us about Utah's loss to Penn State? We're talking about it on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Today's show is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season. More props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. On today's show, it's been a few days since the Rose Bowl, so I decided to dive into the tape, look at a few things that really stood out, and in order to dive into the tape, can't just do it myself. I got to have someone on who is also an expert when it comes to tape breakdowns. It's Bryan Brown. Bryan, talking about the Utes in this game, I just think overall, before we even dive into the tape, just a couple of thoughts, just a few days removed from the game now for me. It's just one of those ones that still stings, especially because I just see some of the special plays and things that Cam was making in the first half back on film, evading pressure, buying time, and doing some of those special things. And it feels like Utah was robbed of a chance of what would have been an incredible comeback that Cam could have led. I said earlier, I still feel like Penn State would have found a way to win that game based on how the second half really just played out, especially with some of those Utah defensive breakdowns. But this is just one where it does feel like a missed opportunity just because it's the second year in a row where Cam can't finish the game in the Rose Bowl, which is just a bummer.
It is, and I think the hardest part about it is this is not how the story is supposed to end for somebody of Cam Rising's caliber.
Yeah.
He's not going to leave this program as the all-time record holder on anything, but my goodness, back-to-back conference champions, first time in Utah football history, a true warrior in terms of football perspective, and I think, given how this week has evolved, I think we can really start to argue that these guys are warriors now. We saw a situation on Monday night that really truly showcases how much players and staff and coaches really put into these games and these situations. And this is a guy who played hurt numerous times, who stepped up every single time his number was called, who I think really did every single thing that this coaching staff asked him to do and this fan base wanted for the most part, other than being able to finish the Rose Bowl. And it's just, you hurt for Cam as a fan. It's just, you get those the ugly thoughts, I call them. The ones that you don't want to really admit that you have, like why can't he just stay healthy and this, that, and the other. And listen, I think sometimes when we try to put those out loud, they either get brushed off or other people tell us, no, like that's not the way to think. We all have those thoughts, right? It's just about understanding what the real important thing is. And the important thing is that Cam Rising is one of the greatest to ever do it at the University of Utah. And because of that, because of the joy that he's brought us, the Bad Moon Rising playing every single time he'd walk out in the stadium. I mean,
Yep.
I'm starting to glow, and it's not just these great, studio lights that I'm starting to turn back on again and showcase here. But I just love Cam Rising.
Yep.
I love his game, his grit, his toughness. I love his leadership. I am sad that he was never able to go all gas, no brakes, like he was able to do with the truck. Because I think where we really saw the greatness of Cam Rising was in that second half against San Diego State, where he stepped in and just went full bore, played his game, and just led Utah back with no holding back. And that's not how Utah's built. That's not how the system is built. That's not how the offense is built. And so I think that's the part that, as I sum up this ramble, because I get emotional when I talk about Cam, I guess, and just ramble on. But I'm just sad that it didn't end the way that I wanted it to for him.
Yeah, he deserved a better ending to the season. It's an unfortunate way it finished up for Cam, but I think overall, looking at this game too, I think one of the things that stood out for me going back and watching the tape really, Bryan, was Cam. And you mentioned a little bit how, and sometimes he wasn't put in the best position to maybe maximize all of his talents. The protection in this game, and that was the one thing I think we looked for. It was like, what changed with Bryson Barnes under center? Well, we look at all the plays Cam can make with his feet and how he's able to maneuver in the pocket, knowing when, okay, I'm going to take off and scramble, knowing when to, okay, I need to move out of the way here, and then I can make that throw. That's something that Bryson isn't as good at, and that really showed up to me because the Utah offensive line, especially in pass protection, they got worked a lot in this game. They gave up 6 sacks overall. I think the left side of the offensive line, you can see Satawa still adjusting to playing over at the right tackle spot. Michael Mokafisi, Paul Miley a couple times with some blitzes. I can point to a point in this game where, and look, that happens every game where guys get beat a couple times, but it felt like it was a lot. Even Brain Daniels at times was getting beat off the edge by Penn State. And I really felt like the Nittany lines did a good job bringing pressure. And even when it was just rush 4, we're still able to get home, and credit those Penn State guys for getting that pressure. And I give a lot of credit to Cam for trying to hang in there, make plays, do fantastic things scrambling, because there's not a lot of quarterbacks who could have done more than what Cam was doing. And I know a lot of people want to point to like, oh, for his completion percentage overall that on the game, he was 8 for 21, but it really, going back and watching it, just reinforced it that I thought Cam really played well. Especially, I'm going to talk about this a little more later, but I want to focus on the offensive line, but I do want to defend Cam. The receivers were not getting open a ton either.
They weren't, and some of that is just the issue that Utah has with how they've decided to build this offense. They want it to be based off of the run game and play action. And I think, you and I talked before when we were evaluating this game, and I said I wasn't super impressed with the front 4 at Penn State, and man, they sure proved me wrong. This was a very physical group. A group that got off the ball well. I thought their interior did a great job of getting push and being quick. And that's really where it looked like Utah was almost standing flat-footed. This looked like almost, again, a tired football team that was showing up against a Penn State team that was super fresh. And you just kind of wonder, why is it that Utah seems to show up for these big games and look a little flat-footed, a little bit sluggish, a little reluctant, especially when I didn't see anything in the game plan that looked like it was super confusing
Yeah,
or
that's a good point.
that wouldn't inspire any kind of confidence. And so that leads me to think that this is a coaching staff that's really pushing that we're going to do the basics, we're going to do it better than them. And Utah just got beat, on very first play. When you watch it, like, Penn State's exploding off the ball and they're jarring guys, and you see Logan Kendall jawing with the linebacker there as he's got a pretty good push on him, and the guy's pushing back. And credit to Manny Diaz and that Penn State crew for bringing some attitude and bringing pressure. I don't love Manny Diaz. I think he gets a lot of accolades for being a very ho-hum coach, but they definitely brought the fight to Utah, and we did not see Utah respond in time like we normally get an opportunity to. And a lot of that was Cam Rising leaving the game. My friends at Cover Zero, you and I have worked with them a little bit at the high school level. They sent me a little snippet from the Rose Bowl showing a win probability chart, and the note there was, guess when Cam Rising went out, and you could see it clear as day that in the graph here it's going up, and all of a sudden there's a drastic drop, and that was it for Utah. They were just never able to really recover, and we can talk about the defensive mistakes around the corner too, but that's that get off. The film never lies when it comes to that kind of stuff, right? And it wasn't so much that I watched the game first time around, and I thought, man, I didn't love the game plan. Felt very vanilla. Didn't see a whole lot, in terms of doing things differently, different formations, everything like that. On the rewatch, it was just, no, it was a lot of Utah just really getting beat to the punch.
It really was, and it's one of the things I think that Utah will look back as missed opportunities in a lot of ways, and that's something that goes everyone up and down. In losses like this, you can point to, like, what's the reason they lost? Well, it's a lot of reasons, basically, and
Yes.
we really hit on the offensive side of the ball. We're going to touch on the defensive side of the ball for the Utes in a moment, but first, I want to talk to you guys about our friends at Built Bar. Looking for a delicious treat, but don't want all of the fat and calories? That's why you got to try a Built Bar. Built Bars are a fantastic snack, and you can get them now, and you don't need to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been talking about ordering your Built Bars at Built.com. Now you can get them at your local Smith's or Sam's Clubs. That's right. Head to your nearest Smith's or Sam's Club today and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up at 4-bar boxes of cookies and cream, coconut puffs, salted caramel, brownie butter puffs at your nearest Smith's. If you're close to Sam's Club, run in, grab a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie batter, churro. You can thank me later, or you can just thank me now, because with Built Bar, you're getting a great deal and a lot of goodness for your money. Brian, one thing that wasn't good for Utah was their second half defense. And it really was important that I look at the first half a lot, and so many. I mean, if you told me Utah held Penn State going into the game, if you said Utah held Penn State to 14 points in the first half, I'd be like, that's a good performance. And a lot of Penn State's offense in the first half, too, was grinded out. Those were long drives it took them to score. And then it was a big play made on a third down that kind of turned the tide for the Nittany Lions in the first half. And then the second half, it was just so deflating because you get Utah marching down the field on that drive, and then you stall. You mentioned the game plan kind of. I think if Andy Ludwig could have one play back, I think it's the Devon pass that they tried to go with that killed all of Utah's momentum as he ended up taking the third and what made it 2nd and 19 after he took that 9-yard loss was a really unfortunate sequence for the Utes that killed all their momentum. Either way, after that, Utah seems like they're getting the momentum back. They hold Penn State to 2 short plays. So then it sets up 3rd and 3, 3rd and 2. And then Coach Whittingham talked about it a little bit too, but just the unfortunate sequence where Penn State kind of faked the check to the sideline. And you can see it on the film how many guys are not ready by the time the ball is snapped. Guys are out of position, just a mess. And then the line snap the ball and boom, they get 180-yard touchdown. And then on the second long touchdown, touching on that one quickly, it just really felt like another unfortunate play where you have them pinned back in their own territory. Nittany Lions give the protection needed to Clifford to buy the time. And then RJ Hubert just made a little bit of a mistake, got caught looking in the backfield, bit on what he thought was a slant. And then all of a sudden you blink and Nittany Lions have their second 85-yard plus touchdown of the game. And it really feels like it was those 2 plays in particular that really cost the Utes in this one.
Yeah, that's when the gap widened, right? And this was already a team that was not in good position to come back with a backup quarterback in there trying to throw the football. And all the love in the world to Bryson Barnes. He has maximized his talent and potential way beyond what anybody else gave him credit coming into. He is a phenomenal backup quarterback.
Yes,
just not built to lead against the greatest of the greats in college football. And I will give a lot of credit to Penn State. I underrated them, because I saw them against Michigan and Ohio State and was like, I'm not that sold on Michigan and Ohio State. And listen, Ohio State played above expectations for me. Michigan played down to them and lost to TCU. So that's part of why we love college football, is because it's really hard to know what's going to happen. But I think the basic things that we've come to know about this Utah team in terms of getting play disparity, that kind of stuff, it didn't happen. The explosive plays have been a problem all year. I think the hard part about it is that these explosive plays, like you mentioned, especially the second big TD, I believe it was Smith that caught that reception. It's just a simple slow go route, right? So a slant and go, a slow go, whatever you want to call it. And RJ Hubert takes a terrible angle on it, gets super far behind. You can see both the other defenders are playing in the flat there, trying to cover it. It's just, what is it that makes you think that you need to go cover for those 2 guys who are already there? They're in the box, in the spot that they need to be in, that you're missing on that. And that was the story of this game all game long, is step slow. I believe it was a 3rd and 16 where Utah had Clifford, and I like to say dead to rights, but he's rolling outside of the pocket. The pass protection or the pass rush is bearing down on him, and he finds a guy opening over the top because, in his 16, 18, 20-yard gain out of bounds on the sideline, because he's slipped right in between the pocket of 2 Utah defenders. Where's the communication on that? Why are we having these kinds of breakdowns this late in the season? Especially when you look at the defense and there wasn't anything that was too exotic in terms of what was happening. So Utah started off early phenomenally well, right? And then you just saw mental breakdowns. And so it makes you wonder why that's happening.
It does. And it's unfortunate that Utah found themselves in those positions where it happened. I think the other thing I'll point to towards the defensive side of the ball is something we've simply been talking about all season, is the lack of a pass rush in a lot of those moments. And you mentioned there were a couple times in this game Utah did get home, but there were a number of big plays and big throws too, where Clifford doesn't even need to really move in the pocket because it is so clean and he has that much time to throw and to make those plays. And as I mentioned, there's a couple times that Utah gets home, but whenever you really needed to stop or to make a big play, and we knew this coming into the game, if Utah sent 4, it was going to be hard for them to get home. That's how it played out. A couple of the blitzes they dialed up. Utah did get 3 sacks in this one, but still too many plays in here where I feel like Clifford really wasn't uncomfortable in the pocket and then was able to deliver a big touchdown like we saw on that 80 plus yard throw he made. When it's unfortunate that it just continued to be one of the, honestly, probably the Achilles heel, I feel like, for this Utah team all season.
It really was. And then, some of that is just, you were introducing a lot of inexperienced guys who hadn't played for a while into your defensive system. Now, you saw a lot of guys really grow. For example, we're talking about inexperienced guys. Lander Barton had 4 tackles, 1 sack, and 3 TFLs. That's quite a finish from compared to
Pretty
what
good
he
against
was
Penn
against
State, yeah.
Florida. Yeah, that's growth. That's what you want to
Yes.
see. And that's a guy, we're recording this on the heels of Mo Diabate announcing the NFL. I'm not worried about that position because Landon Barton's really, really good,
Yep.
and I know that he's going to continue to improve next year, and that's a position that I'm not worried about. Now, the safety position, there's a lot of guys coming back. Who's going to step up and be a guy back there? Cole Bishop started off the year on fire. Didn't see a lot of him towards the end of the year. Sione Vaki really stepped into a
Yes.
role and started to play well. 8 tackles for him in that game. Who's going to, Nate Ritchie coming home from the mission is a big thing. We've heard a lot about Clayton Isbell as well, the transfer from Illinois State. So there are all these guys that Utah has in that safety room. Who's going to step up and be the leader, and who's going to step up and make sure that those mistakes aren't happening? I used to get on Vontae Davis all the time for making those little tiny or Vontae Davis, right? 2 years
I
ago.
believe so.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I don't know why I'm tripping on that one, but I used to get on Vontae all the time, and he became an absolute stalwart and a stud because he was always where he needed to be. And we used to say all the time, the best ability is dependability. Utah needs some dependable guys on that defense, and I think you're starting to see some guys emerge. Part of that dependability is not just sacks, right? It's
Yeah,
pressure, and you want to get pressure
exactly.
over and over and over again. And we just didn't see it from Utah. And again, this is a team that's been through a lot the past 2 years. It was a
Yes.
long season, and we know that bowl prep for Kyle Whittingham is a grind. So I don't want to take anything away from guys in terms of how they performed in a bowl game. It's an exhibition. It's one that you really truly want to want to win. But at the end of the day, it's not the end of the season. There's still so many good things to hang the hats on. There's also a lot of work to be done.
100%. And you mentioned guys, you mentioned Cole, RJ, I think is another guy. They were one of the better safety tandems in the Pac-12. And you see a lot of the good they've done on the season. But in this game, there was one tackle in particular. I remember where Cole, it was a big third down. He wasn't able to finish it. We mentioned RJ and his coverage bust there. You just need to be able to make those plays against the best teams if you are Utah and you want to continue to rise to those new heights as a program. Brian, you also mentioned development. I want to shout out one guy who he still experienced ups and downs, and he did in this game, honestly, too. Connor O'Toole was getting more pressure in this game. He continues to win a little bit more. I feel like all these opportunities that he's gotten have only helped him, and I'm excited to see what he's able to do next year because I'm very encouraged by what I've seen from him. You can still see the growing pains. He's one of the guys that didn't get home in a couple of those key opportunities, but he started to get back there more and create pressure all throughout the season. He's a guy I'm really excited about as it pertains to next year. One guy we can't be excited about as it pertains to next season for the Utes is Micah Bernard. We're going to come back in a second and talk about Micah announcing he's transferring from Utah and what that means for the program, as well as in general, just what we expect from transfers this Utah offseason in a moment. But first, want to talk to you guys about our friends at UCCU. UCCU is offering a 15-month savings certificate with an incredibly high APY of 4.00%. Plus, you can jump up to an even higher rate of return anytime during the life of your certificate. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but interest rates and inflation are both on the rise, as if we hadn't noticed. Well, here's some good news. UCCU can help you use this current rise in rates to your advantage. For a limited time, UCCU is offering a 15-month savings certificate with an incredibly high APY of 4.00%. What's a savings certificate? Is that like a savings account? A savings certificate is similar to a savings account. Both are great ways to earn a safe return on your money over time. But here's the difference. Savings accounts typically come with unlimited deposits and withdrawals. But a savings certificate, you just make one deposit, then let your money grow and grow and grow with a fixed rate of return that's much higher than a standard savings account. How much higher? Let's just say a lot higher. Make sure you guys head over to a UCCU branch or visit UCCU.com today to cash in on that 15-month savings certificate with the incredibly high APY of 4.00%. They have a variety of terms and options to match your specific needs. UCCU, love where you bank. Brian, Utah was hit with their first kind of major transfer news earlier this week when it was announced that Micah Bernard is going to be looking for a new home. Bernard been with the team for the past 4 seasons now. He's had over 500 yards rushing in each of the last 2 seasons, and we know what he provides as a receiver out of the backfield. He played some of his best football of the season in the Pac-12 championship game and in the Rose Bowl. And a large part of that to me was because he was really just starting to get healthy. It felt like battled some injuries in the middle of the season. He made a big play against Florida early on in the year too, and I think when you see Micah leave, I think a lot of people thought he was going to the NFL draft. I personally was in that camp, but I think it looks like he wants an opportunity to be the guy somewhere because it was going to be him and Jaquindon if he had decided to come back. And it makes sense that he's looking for that opportunity, but it does suck if you are Utah to lose a guy who you thought had a chance to come back. That was one of your really strong 1-2 punches to close out the season.
He was ended up, basically being the lion's share of the carries after the departure of Tavion Thomas. But I think really what it is he was the most steady running back
Yes.
in the room for the University of Utah for a good part of the season. And he has been such a steadying influence in a lot of respects. I think it feels like a long time ago that Utah played BYU and they were still trying to figure out who was going to be the running back in that game. And Micah was the bright star, and
Yeah.
everybody thought that he was the future. Now, he's been a team guy all along. He's been willing to share the reps,
Yes.
been willing to play in multitude
Pass
of
blocking.
roles, and always stepped up to do whatever it is he was asked to do. And I will never forget his touchdown catch in last year's Rose Bowl. But
Yes.
then you contrast that with him having to play cornerback
I know.
too. So it's really hard to ask, to look at a guy and be like, man, do more. Especially a guy like Micah. That being said, I think he is in the mode of exploration.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important because it doesn't necessarily mean that he'll transfer to a different institution per se. He may end up going to the NFL. It just
True.
kind of depends on how things happen. But going into the portal definitely means that he will have the opportunity to talk to other teams as well. And for a guy who spent a long time at the University of Utah, he's been here, for, I believe, 4 or 5 years, and is still in a pretty young state and has done a lot. I can understand wanting to go and try something different. For those of us who have been to grad school, sorry, us, not me. Um, for people who've been to grad school, you understand maybe not wanting to go back to the school that you were at originally and wanting to try something else. The scape of college football is such to where if a guy has given 4 years to an institution and done his best and given as much as Micah has, and he wants to leave, wish him the best.
100%.
And there are going to be players like that all throughout the course of time here at the University of Utah. There are going to be players that are going to want to make changes. We have this necessity to kind of downplay the younger generation because the older generations didn't get those opportunities. And I think sometimes maybe the problem is the older generations, right? So we
I mean, I'm
have to
part of the
look at,
younger generation, so you're preaching to me right now.
yeah. Well, I'm part of the older generation, so I understand a lot of what it is that I deal with in terms of looking at the scape of college football and the way things are
Mhm.
changing. Do I love it? Of course not.
Yeah.
I love these players. I get attached to them just
Mhm.
like everybody else. That being said, I root for people over laundry, and I
True.
want to see the people do great things. And so if Micah's ready to move on, I want to see him do great things wherever he goes. I hope it's not a Pac-12 school. I can't guarantee that. But at at the end of the day, I guess the comfort that I take from all that is a Utah fan and Jeff Hansen has the best line, fanfluencers, because that's kind of where we're at, right? Half media, half fans.
Yeah.
Um, as a Utah fanfluencer, I know what Utah has as a program, and I know they're going to move on, and I know they'll be just fine, and they will rebound and have a plan B and a plan C and a plan D. At one point in time, people would have, text look at Jaquin and Jackson. I'll just say it that way.
Yeah.
So
Nope. Very true. I'm Brian. Maybe this is my youth, by the way, but dropping bars on the pod as well. I personally haven't heard that. I work for people over laundry. I thought that was woof. I thought that was fire, my friend. That was nice. And one other thing I think is
I
important.
blacked out. What happened?
We mentioned Micah, and Micah is the first, but he's not a single domino. He's a part of a chain of dominoes, basically. As I struck, see, I need to leave all the metaphors and stuff to you this episode.
Keep going.
Anyways,
Knock those dominoes over.
with Micah, he's the first guy to go. He's not going to be the last. It might be a couple other players that played a prominent role that surprised us. It might be a couple of younger guys who were waiting to get their opportunity, and they might want to try and see if the grass is greener on the other side. I think it is going to be interesting to see what this transfer season looks like for Utah. It's been sweeping college football. I mean, how long ago did Cade McNamara announce he was going to Iowa? That's how long the rest of the college football world has been dealing with this stuff. And it's finally coming into effect for Utah now. And it's happening as quickly as this week, just fresh off the heels of the Rose Bowl, because this is how fast things move. Teams have already started to fill their needs. So if guys want to get in the transfer portal, or want to take those next steps, they need to go and do it. And it's going to be interesting to see how this week shakes out and the weeks to come in terms of transfers, the transfer deadline, the first one being January 19th.
It is, and I think the hard part about it is we would love to speculate on names, but we just don't know timing of it, and we don't know what conversations are going on in the background, and when a coach, for example, Chad Bumphis leaves the program, and I think it's a surprise to a lot of people, but it's one of those things where I think you kind of heard some whispers that maybe there were going to be opportunities down the road. It all is so dependent upon other chess moves in a lot of ways, and there are a lot of directions that guys can go, and so you have to kind of weed through it with a bit of generality, I guess is the word maybe I'm looking for. Like, we can't be
Mm.
super specific on some of this stuff, but I think the overall play is that it comes in phases, and I think that's kind of the point that you're trying to make is there's this initial phase where the portal opens and everybody's gone, right? I think it speaks really highly to the character of the program and the character of the players at the University of Utah that so many of them waited until the Rose Bowl ended to try
Sure.
and make those moves, because they respect Coach Whittingham, they respect their teammates, they respect the program, and nobody wanted to disrupt what was happening in the Rose Bowl. There were a few departures, but it was names that like Tyler Weegis that you just kind of expected. He's been here for 3 years, still hasn't been able to put on the weight. It's one of those things. I think the other part of it too is you're going to hear some names and be like, oh my gosh. But there is so much talent in this program. There are going to be some younger guys that are going to
Yeah.
surpass the older ones, and they know it. I think it's really hard sometimes because when you're out on the field or you're in it every single day, you know a lot more than other people how hard it is to go up and overcome some of the adversity. And
True.
we tend to want guys to stay and fight, and we want guys to be on the roster, and we want to have depth, and we want to have all this kind of stuff. And sometimes it's really hard to tell a guy who for 3 years has felt the footsteps, and we don't see a lot of practice for a reason.
Mm.
Every single day when he's been in practice and he knows he's starting to slip and lose his spot, that there's another guy coming up. It's really hard to tell that person to stick around and just keep going with the waves crashing at their backs. So that's kind of a long-winded, journey away from what you were talking about. But this is the scape of college football. Now, do things need to change? Does there need to be new regulation? Does there need to be an evolution with everything that's happened with the portal and NIL and everything else? 100%. And I think
Yep.
you and I have talked about this both privately and on the
Yes.
pod. We need some regulations, and we need better deadlines, and that's part of the problem as well is that you kind of have to force your way in to the portal in these tight windows. And so you're going to see it happen again come spring, and I wouldn't be surprised to see wide receivers, enter the transfer portal after spring once a new coach is hired. If there are other coach departures, we used to see a lot of those happen in February because that's after signing day.
Yep.
Um, Now it's happening a little bit earlier, and the
Scott
carousel
Bumper.
moves faster. Yeah, and so it's real hard now because I think it feels like it's too frequent, and then there's too many of these windows that are opening up, and too often are guys trying to leave. And so I think really what needs to happen is the NCAA needs to find some way to get some regulation, whether it's going through the feds or getting schools to band together, however it is that they go about doing it. That's really the problem that I see facing this. It's not just the Utah problem, and we can talk about locally how it's because it's going to happen.
Yep.
People loved it when Logan Fano committed to Utah, and we're gonna hate it when some Utah player commits to
Yep.
BYU, and it's
Give and take away.
yeah, 100%, and it's just that's part of the game, and it's I talk about recruiting as being touchdowns scored. Other teams are gonna score during the course of the game, and
Yes.
and we don't ever wanna see it. Fans are very fickle, and for good reason, man. The fans commit a ton of time, effort, energy, money. Like, it was not
Yes.
cheap for either of us to get to the Rose Bowl, and through all the struggles too, but I would never wanna miss one of those opportunities, and I told someone on the phone the other day, I love going and watching my team lose in the Rose Bowl. That's a terrible
Frankly, honest, it's
mentality to
true
have.
though.
It is. It's so much fun, and I get to see lots of good people. Nikki Tizzle. I don't know if he's even listening, but it was great to bump into him. And that was like before the game even started. A
Yeah.
lot of people on the causeways and everything like that, and I love it. It's great. You see different people too, so it just there's a lot to it that's really positive. And even though we're kind of like still, we're all going to smarm from this loss. It's
Oh, for
it's
sure.
I remember all the bad losses from when I was really, really young. And you go through this enough, especially when you've done it on the coaching side, and when I was at Cyprus, we were awful based on our record. I have a lot of belief in those players that I coach, those individuals in our team as a whole. We just didn't get enough time to overcome everything.
Yeah.
But that's a different story, and as you start to go through that stuff, you realize that the losses are going to come. But like for Utah this year, there were so few losses and
Yes.
so many wins, and that's the stuff that's really great to celebrate. And even though this one didn't quite go the way that we wanted it to, there's a lot of good things on the horizon. I mean, this is still the best recruiting class in Utah history, hands down, and there's a lot to be excited about.
There is a lot to be excited about. And I think the last thing I want to bring up, because you mentioned the transfer portal and NIL restrictions and all these other kind of things, the changes that need to come in college athletics. We focus so much on the positive aspects of the transfer portal. There are a lot of guys who enter the portal who won't have an opportunity to play college football again. And I think that needs to be more spotlighted. And this is just a general college football program. This is not talking about Micah Bernard is obviously going to have an opportunity to play football again. I mean, come on, what he did at Utah, he's easily going to find home. But there are a lot of other guys. Some probably play at Utah that will enter the portal just based on the odds and how it goes. And a lot of others that just play college football all over the place, that they're not going to have that opportunity. And that is one of the unfortunate things. And we'll see what those changes and regulations and things look like in the future. But grass isn't always greener on the other side. And it's always interesting to see how the transfer portal shakes out, Brian.
You know what, man? And I want to close off that because you talk about poetry. That one of my favorite phrases: "The grass is always greenest where you water it." And that applies to fans too, right? Like you and I sit here behind the microphones, and I've got a green mouse background here that because this is where I got to water my grass every single day.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I got to do the work here. I can't go do it else anywhere else. And same as fans. So if you really want to maximize your fan experience, everything like that, be right where you are as a Utah fan. Be the best fan you can be. Same with all those players out there that want to be at Utah. Make the most of your time while you're there. Whatever happens, happens. And as I said in my tweet to close things out, I remember a dilapidated stadium that was built on dirt that would literally slide downhill every single year to where your row got an inch smaller every single year when you go back to it. And there was AstroTurf and kids playing football in the north end zone. And so if you're old enough to remember that kind of stuff, it is a great time to be a Utah fan regardless. And change is coming, and change can be a really good thing because change got us from, I think it was 34,000 at the old Rice Stadium up until, up to 52,000 now at Rice Eccles. And it is a beautiful stadium and it is tough to beat. As far as stadium experiences go, I think there's maybe one other that I would rank ahead of Rice Eccles, and that's the Rose Bowl. So,
I 100% agree with that. It is an outstanding place to watch Rice Eccles games and, of course, in the Rose Bowl, too. And look, Utah football is going to have to wait by the time this episode comes out. I will say around 235 plus days until they're back playing in Rice Eccles again. I know, Brian. It's going to be a long haul, but we appreciate you guys watching Locked On Utes. All of you guys who continue to spend time here. This is one of our better weeks overall, even if it was one of the worst weeks for me in the comment section, taking some L's for the loss. But overall, we can't thank you guys enough for supporting this show. And also want to take a second before we go. Once again, thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every day. Also want to thank you for going over and checking out Locked On College Basketball. Make sure you check out a brand new podcast, Locked On College Basketball. Everything you need to know about college basketball in one place. You can hear from the biggest names, experts, insiders, coaches, and players. Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Brian, always great having you on the show, and it may be a while till we get the Rose Bowl, but it's not the last time we're hearing Utah football news. The offseason should be an interesting one.
It will be, and it's always going to be a roller coaster. That's part of why we love college football. It's also why we love the fact that the University of Utah has one of the more stable programs and athletic departments in the country. That is a great group of people that does a great job, and it is a great. We live in a great state of football, JT,
Yes.
and I think you know that as well as anybody, having seen a lot of football in a lot of different places. So, maybe I'll be back around spring ball. Who knows? My basketball prowess is just not. Maybe I'll get into gymnastics with Sammy Mora. I don't know. We'll find out. But at the very least, there's going to be a lot of football left to play and a lot of football to come. So that's a good thing.
Interesting to see how it all plays out. Thanks to Brian again for joining us. Thank you all for joining us all week long on Locked On Utes. Have a great weekend. And as always, go Utes.